has
Carry on.
A lot to say.
I'm learning a lot.
Well, I wanted to learn a lot. But, you know, Venezuela was fascinating for me because I found myself, you know, I was pulling for, and I am pulling for Chavez. I'm pulling for anybody who wants to make a sincere effort to try to make oil work for the people, to try to use oil revenues to raise people's living standards, their health, their education, their welfare. And obviously kind of the status quo, as it operated in Venezuela, as it's operated in so many countries, in political ways and economic ways, hasn't been working. And so Chavez came into power and said, I'm going to do it differently. And, you know, to my mind, anybody's going to try to do it differently in a responsible way or an imaginative way, that's good. You need to try something different, do it right. My problem with Chavez is just that I think that he's kind of failing in the sense, not in the sense of like the social education programs are wrong. I mean, there's more money going into health, there's more money going into education, there's more money going to welfare, and that is long overdue, that is great. But I don't see kind of like economic programs that will help develop kind of a sustainable economy that's not based on oil. And I also see kind of like a lot of money that's being spent outside of Venezuela for the grand political projects that Chavez himself personally has. And people in America are getting their heating oil from Venezuela at reduced subsidized prices, which is great for the people in America. They need it. People in Venezuela need it more. And it's such a hard job to try to make oil work for the people, because it's not just kind of spending money on doctors. It's a lot more than that. And I just think that kind of Chavez has these broader visions that get in the way of doing this very, 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 very hard job of trying to develop a sustainable economy that uses oil money to grow other sectors. And I just don't see him doing it that well. I went to visit one of the cooperatives that his government kind of was promoting, and it just reminded me. It was a nice cooperative, and everybody kind of worked, you know, 6-hour shifts and in very good conditions. It was very well lit. Really wonderful shoe factory, but the shoes were terrible, and it just reminded me, and it reminded me of Yugoslavia. I covered the Balkans, and I remember like in 1983 or 85, one of my first trips to Yugoslavia, going to one of these Tito-era worker-run cooperatives, and it was the same situation. Workers all vote on their pay, and they vote on their conditions and all that. And I'm not kind of like calling for, you know, the return of capitalist bosses to these places, but it was a mirage. You know, these factories in Yugoslavia were pumping out stuff that nobody wanted, and Venezuela, I just don't see, is kind of like developing a manufacturing sector, or even reinvigorating its farming sector in a way that's going to provide long-term, you know, prosperity. You know.
Well, it's sort of, isn't it like, you know, the way the colonials dealt with Africa, where every country became sort of a one commodity, you know, producer, if you like, and sort of, so there was no fuller growth to the society, to the country, to their economies. Well, it feels like oil in so many countries, once it's discovered in any quantity, it overtakes everything else, and sort of like you're saying, it sort of stifles like holistic, wider growth. You know, and this gets to your question: how do we avoid that in Uganda, right?
Yeah.
And they found a lot of oil in Uganda?
It's between Uganda and Congo.
Right.
So that's a big problem because Congo's already unstable.
Already unstable, yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough.
You should look into it. See what it is.
And I have to second this thing about in Baghdad. I did a whole series of photographs on the ministries after I went there in July of 2003, and I did a whole series on that. I have that actually there. All the ministries destroyed or burnt, and then you go to the oil ministry, and it's perfect. You know, it's such a concise and clear visual illustration of what you were saying. It's so true. Hard not to be cynical when you see that. Yeah.
If we have time for me to ask one question of Ed, I don't know. Photography, do you find yourself more or less satisfied with the power of photography and the power of the work that you do?
Well, you know, if I were to listen to what everybody was saying about photography, photojournalism, I would give up. But what I see, particularly when I talk to university and even high school students, but all over the world when I give lectures, I find people are quite impacted by photography. And I think, though, we're shifting, the way media is morphing and changing, and I look at, you know, my 14-year-old son and his group with all their devices, I think still photography that's why I'm doing multimedia.